Hello world, Dan Brown here with another episode of Pogobat. 3 weeks in a row, new Pogobats. Interesting times we live in. This one's going to be a little bit more serious. The last 2 weeks, a little bit silly. I was just like stretching my legs out, shaking the dust off, but I do want to get into more like serious political conversations with y'all, but I feel like this video here might be a little bit of a prerequisite before we get into that, and I'll get into what I mean exactly by that in a minute here. But first of all, some background. I have spent the last 2 years pretty much entirely away from YouTube. I mean, I've uploaded videos, maybe quarterly, every couple of months, just because it's a hobby that I enjoy. It's a good creative outlet, but I've been focusing on other things. I think it's healthy to step away from things that you love sometimes to come back with a fresh perspective. And, I have not been trying to build or maintain any sort of audience with any sort of consistent content, right? It's been totally scattershot, and whoever has watched has watched. But over the last 10 months, I have been poking my finger, sticking it into the YouTube pie just a little bit more, specifically on my gaming channel. Pogobat Gaming is a channel dedicated pretty much entirely to this very specific niche format of the very specific game Magic the Gathering. If you play the format Elder Dragon Highlander, aka Commander, I do consider myself a subject matter expert on that. I love EDH, Commander, and if you play and you haven't checked it out, you should. I'm really proud of the content I'm pushing out there, and I think that you would really get something out of it. And I don't really care that much how well this gaming channel does. I plan to continue doing it for a long time, just because Commander is a hobby that I love so much, and video making is also a hobby that I love a lot, and both kind of each enriches the other, right? The more videos I make about Commander, the better I get both at making videos and at playing Commander. So even if it's a couple hundred people watching, like, they have serious ideas that help me become a more serious player, and building out this channel. The whole point of that is it has helped me figure out a little bit more about how I might apply the production strategies that I've used there to something a little harder to pin down. Like, Pogobat Gaming is about Elder Dragon Highlander, very specific, very easy to give you a concrete answer. Pogobat here, well, it's about me and what I don't know. I don't really know how to explain what Pogobat is. It's just my YouTube channel, right? It's been very nice to start off with gaming content because it's concrete, and as I have committed creative ideas to video week after week on that gaming channel, I have improved in the iterative process of making videos, the nuts and bolts, right, of the production. I have figured out literally what you're looking at right now. This, sitting here with the condenser mic plugged into my computer, I'm screen capturing a Google Slides presentation while also filming on my camcorder over here with like a light up there. And it doesn't matter that my air conditioner's on because I'm using this condenser mic. Can't really hear it unless I do this. Do you hear that? I don't even know if you can hear that, but I don't know what the point of that really is. The point of this slide is that the feedback loop I've gone through with Pogobat Gaming has gotten me to a point where, for the first time in a long time, this setup has gotten me excited about the potential for engaging with you guys about serious stuff again. I've been excited about the potential for making content on Pogobat again for the first time in, at least 2 years. So, over the last decade, as I have been making content, publishing it to YouTube, I've almost always at least peppered in, if not made it like the sole focus, serious conversations about serious things. And it's no secret, I am not the first to tell you, that we live in serious times right now. I very, very much want to begin that kind of discourse again. But before I start shouting from the rooftop, standing on this YouTube digital soapbox as though I'm entitled to attention, I do feel that there is a meta conversation that this very serious moment in the world kind of calls for, especially for a person like me. I've been wrestling with this in private and with people that I love and trust, and I'm ready to move this conversation more into the open because I'm very curious to know what you guys have to say about this, but it's also just a part of the process of establishing, maybe reestablishing trust, being able to put myself out there in a way that I feel is, an accurate representation of who I really am and where I'm really coming from. And that's something that I have not always done that well. Sometimes, my most angst-ridden YouTube-related experiences have been when I really feel that what people are seeing is not an accurate reflection of who I really am in the real world. And that's part of why I love this format so much. There are no jump cuts here. You are just, it's just me talking to you for 10 to 20 minutes, maybe more. So anyway, many of you, I'm sure, have seen Hannah Gadsby's Netflix stand-up special called Nanette. It's incredible. You should watch it if you haven't seen it. It's an hour long. I'm only going to scratch the surface here in my, kind of synopsis. I'm going to pick some very specific threads from it, but you should watch it. After you pause this right now and go watch it. I don't even care if you come back to this. Like, this is more important. But during the special, she announces that she's quitting comedy. She's not going to do stand-up comedy anymore, and she very kind of gradually, elegantly, eloquently paints a picture explaining what she sees as the problems with the medium of stand-up comedy and how stand-up has prevented her from fully telling her very important story. Her story, I'll let her tell it. She tells it better than I ever could, and it's not my story to tell. But when told fully, it's a story that is rooted in justified anger, in righteous anger, and our culture doesn't really let people from marginalized groups, or maybe you can just say women. Women aren't entitled in our culture to be angry comics, right? The only people who are able to be angry comedians seem to be white dudes complaining about PC culture, and then they're heralded as heroes of free speech, where, just if a woman took to the stage and tried to be angry in the same ways, I think that many people watching, my content probably would be perfectly wholesome and good about it. But like our culture at large, we'd tune it out. It would make people uncomfortable because that's not the role of women in a patriarchal society. For the marginalized, success in stand-up comedy comes from self-deprecation, like almost exclusively, right? In some ways, for the culture at large not to reject you out of hand, you have to deliver your jokes in a way where, you kind of walk in backwards on your tiptoes with your head held down. You make fun of yourself a little bit, and that's like implicitly asking permission to speak to a large audience where, white, straight, cis men are not required by culture to, jump through that sort of hoop. People like me can just stand up and shout their opinions to everyone, and no one really bats an eye. We kind of expect that. We take that for granted. Now, I am not an aspiring comic. I have never really wanted to be a comedian. I've thought about it before. Like, I have the skill set for it, but I've never been really drawn to it. At the same time, though, like there's a microphone here, and I'm talking at an audience. There are definitely some parallels to what I'm doing and what Hannah Gadsby, I guess, is no longer doing, but has dedicated so much of her life to mastering. And so, yeah, like I said, I really, really want to talk about, Donald Trump and what that means and where the investigation's at and what the left should do in response. And, is the world going to end before I see, my 50th birthday, blah-de-blah-de-blah. But, yeah, this moment requires a meta conversation before I just jump right on in. Because, if we don't have that meta conversation, first of all, I really need to do the due diligence to, expose these ideas to sunlight so that you can, disinfect any inadvertent toxicity that might be embedded in my outlook. But at the same time, like, for you to understand where I'm really coming from, for me to feel like I'm being represented accurately in my content, this has to be the first video. This has to be the first conversation, like serious conversation, that I have in 2018 and on. So a little bit of background, when I was like 18 to 21 years old, at the peak of my post-viral Rubik's Cube tutorial YouTube popularity, I was a kid, all right? I want to emphasize that I was a kid. the prefrontal cortex of my brain had not fully developed. I was not as good at long-term planning and not as good at understanding how certain things might come across, on the internet. But anyway, I digress. I, at that age, actively encouraged certain memes in the comments of my videos that said things to the effect of, Dan Brown for president. I didn't hold it too close to my chest, if you read between the lines, that my long-term ambition was to parlay YouTube success and some sort of audience here into some far-flung political success, some pursuit of high office. And, that's been an ambition of mine for a long time, but the rise of Donald Trump and, the subsequent Me Too movement and this increased awareness in the world around us of just, identity and what it means and, ignorance and what ignorance can do to a society has caused me to, examine those ambitions more than I ever have. Part of privilege is ignorance, right? And no matter how well-meaning I might conceive of myself as being, like, I have a lot of privilege, and, part of privilege is ignorance, and part of ignorance is boxing out important voices without recognizing that you're even doing that. So, leads me to my next slide. I know that I have rhetorical talents. I know that I have strong convictions, but I will always have blinders due to my privilege and subsequent ignorance. Privilege, a lot of it is things that you have. But a lot of what people don't understand about privilege, I think, is that it's largely defined by what you don't have and never have to think about, right? There are so many things that, members of marginalized groups have to think about and worry about every single day that the world never asks me to think about those things. So I can be blissfully unaware. As well-meaning as I may be, there are things that I just cannot understand about the day-to-day experience of members of marginalized groups. And so, I don't know what the world's going to look like when I'm 50, if we make it that far. But at the age of 28, in the year 2018, I am coming to recognize that the groups I represent are not the groups in need of greater representation in the halls of power in the United States of America and around the world, right? I want to state unequivocally here that I do not want to run for anything. Until further notice, I have dropped that ambition. I want to do everything in my power. I still care deeply about politics. I still have just as strong of convictions, but I want to use my skills to create space, to create a world where, queer socialist women of color or, someone who has at least a couple of those identities, where they can ascend to power confidently and safely and, help make a world that is, safer and more fair from a perspective that, is more rich than mine is. So as it relates to YouTube, as it relates to Nanette, I've been wrestling with Nanette because part of me wonders if that same logic that, I've used to, reach the conclusion that I should drop my political ambitions, if that doesn't also apply to YouTube, right? Part of me wonders if, I start actively building some kind of a soapbox here, could I be boxing out other voices that might be more important? And I wouldn't be making even this video if I thought that the ultimate answer to that question was yes. I think YouTube is distinct. This is not the same as running for office. But I do think that we need to talk about it. I do think that the question needs to be floated. I do not think that the point of Nanette from Hannah Gadsby is that, all cis straight white men should stop doing stand-up comedy entirely, right? No, that's ridiculous. But I do think it is that, everyone needs to approach comedy or whatever their medium happens to be, empathetically and compassionately, and do everything in their power to understand what it might be like to be someone from a marginalized group trying to approach the exact same medium. So what I am trying to do here is a bit of a high wire act. I'm trying to build an additional layer of privilege in the form of a soapbox on YouTube, on top of an already, very privileged life. And, I want to use that soapbox to lead conversations about sensitive issues, and the TLDR, the too long didn't read or the too long didn't watch about this whole thing I'm wrestling with is, who am I to assume that mantle? All right, who am I to assume that mantle? Why should I get to do that? And I think the key to resolving that question, to understand, is defining what exactly this mantle is, to define what the North Star should be every time I'm trying to release YouTube content about serious topics. And I want to address kind of an archetype, a stereotype that is often true about, liberal, cis, straight, white men who take to the internet to very publicly check their privilege and to apologize for their identity, and then they sit back and wait for the accolades to roll in. They sit back and wait for all the minority voices to pat them on the head and say, "Oh, you're such a good cis, straight, white guy. Wow, you're a real hero." Okay, I have been guilty of that. I have been guilty of that in the past as a younger, clumsier progressive. There were moments where my big ham hands traipsed right into my big ignorant ham hands. They were put all over, sensitive topics that weren't really mine to discuss. On the screen here is the moment that I, to this day, am the most embarrassed about in my YouTube career, where I tried to talk about trans issues with a trans exclusionary radical feminist without just totally ignorantly conflating the identity of lesbian with the identity of transgender, as though they are inherently similar, as though they're inherently the same, as though a member of one group has any, inherent insight into the experience of another, when in fact, like in this specific case, the exact opposite was true, and I was just blind to it. And I made like ostrich egg on my face. I very embarrassed about that. I don't want to do that, and I recognize that I have done that, and I'm trying to change slides. There we go. All right, slide changed. Okay, so I'm not trying to be some heroic white guy, right? And I definitely do not want to repeat the mistakes of my past. And I think that weirdly, part of solving this issue, this complex, nuanced thing that I'm wrestling with, is understanding, who my audience really is. Like, weirdly, the fix, I think, is to come to terms with the fact that I am making content for people mostly who are like me. My audience is 84% male. Okay. Right here is a very insightful blurb. Men who want to be feminists do not need to be given space in feminism. They need to take the space they have in society and make it feminist, right? It's not my job to go waltzing into other people's conversations and trying to solve them for them. It's my job to listen to the voices of the marginalized in the world at large and in my life personally, and to try to impart their wisdom, to try to understand their worldview as best as I can, and then translate that to other people who are like me. By and large, I mean, I don't want to exclude anyone. If you do not share all of the privilege markers that I have, and you happen to be watching this, like you are absolutely still welcome. I want you to feel welcome and part of the conversation. But the reality is that most of my audience is kind of like me, and in the past that bothered me, like, probably 2 years ago, a little more than, when the last time I was trying to make content regularly. Our culture was beginning to have a conversation about, improving representation in Hollywood, on television, and, at that point, my line of thinking was, doesn't that apply to my YouTube content also? Shouldn't I be trying to make content for more than just the white dudes out there? Today, I think the answer is kind of no. I listen to a lot of music. Most people listen to a lot of music. And I use Spotify. My girlfriend also uses Spotify, and we have similar tastes in music. But my music tends to have male lead singers, and her music tends to have female lead singers. And there's nothing wrong about that, right? That is perfectly natural and normal. We are empathetic beings, right? In the same way that you feel sympathy pain when you witness someone getting hurt, when you're listening to music, I think most people subconsciously kind of experience sympathy singing along silently, right? You kind of feel, you imagine what it would be like for yourself to be singing along, singing the same notes that, you know, the singer is singing. And so for me, like, my body, my range vocally is a male range. So I am naturally drawn towards listening to music with male lead singers. And for my girlfriend, the opposite is true. She listens to more music with women lead singers. And I think that same idea applies to YouTube, right? I think that people are going to naturally be drawn to creators that share a lot of their background, because you're going to be able to just intuitively understand where they're coming from the best, and it's going to lead to maybe the most close kind of relationship you can have through this medium. So I mean, not to say that this content is only for white guys. Obviously, I don't feel that way, but I also am beginning to recognize that naturally that is just what is happening here. So, I do not want to make content for dudes. I do not want to be Joe Rogan's protege. I saw a really funny, there's that Steven Crowder meme, you convince me I'm wrong or whatever, and it was, Joe Rogan is just Oprah for women. Prove me wrong. It's true. It's just true. I don't want that. That's the last thing that I want. What I want is to move the needle, to push the Overton window to the left, to create an opportunity for the kind of social change, societal change that can lead to a sustainable future where all people are safe in all spaces, in all identities. But the pragmatic approach to that involves constantly checking myself about who I am and who is watching this, and similarly importantly, who I'm not and who is not watching this, as much anyway. So as I continue making new content, as I keep feeling out what I want to do in this space in 2018, I see it as my job to listen and learn from the voices of the marginalized in my personal life and in the world at large, and then to try to translate their knowledge, their wisdom as best as I can to whoever happens to be watching, understanding full well that disproportionately who's watching are people who share my privilege. So that's the bow I have put on this video. Leave a comment below and let me know just whatever thought is at the front of your mind as this video comes to me. Whatever point I've made, that you're either wrestling with the most or find the most insightful. I want to have a conversation in the comments below, and I want to continue having insightful, engaging conversations with this audience until we all die, as the sea levels continue to rise and the climate crisis forces migration crises, which result in wars, which result in nuclear annihilation and nuclear winter and the end of human civilization. It's a bleak time, all right? I don't mean to be a downer, but things are going to get worse before they get better. But hopefully we can be part of those things getting better.